Welcome to the Athlete Brand Advisor Podcast, featuring interviews and news about NIL. We also have special episodes to talk about recent news, events, and anything in the world of sports. The podcast is brought to you by Pliable, a full-service marketing company, an NIL agency that educates and empowers athletes to build their athlete brand. Now, here's your host, Greg Glynn.
Thanks and welcome to the podcast. I'm Greg Glynn, your host, and I'm glad we are joined by two great guests today as we dive into our episode. Erin Sarles and Thomas Rowe are with me, and they are co-founders and amazing people to talk to today about what they call a blueprint to Bluechip. And I'm really excited because they're doing a lot of the things in the NIL space that I talk about all the time, and I found two like-minded people to talk about it with. So it's going to be great. Guys, welcome into the podcast.
Awesome, Greg. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Greg.
Yeah, this is going to be fun today. And Erin, we'll start with you ladies first. Obviously bringing 20 years of corporate executive expertise to the youth sports arena, where you saw firsthand, both as a professional and as a mother, competitive athletes, the devastating impact, obviously, that can come with performance-based identity. And then as the CEO and co-creator of Blueprint to Bluechip's framework and what you guys have built, you are able to address this character crisis in youth sports with really a same systematic rigor that you brought to developing corporate careers, which I think is really an interesting way to look at it, because we do have a problem here. And I want to hear about your background, and I want to learn more about your perspective.
Okay, so first and foremost, the most important thing that you shared there is that I'm a mom and that I am living this firsthand with two student athletes myself that are currently in high school. And so that's where my passion of bringing it to the youth sports really lies, is seeing the challenges that they face and looking at my expertise that I bring, which is really probably unconventional for most people if they look at it on the surface. But I spent, as you shared, 20 plus years in corporate America. And one thing I will say, in the brands that I worked in, have worked for, I had the opportunity to really understand that people are the secret sauce to success. And so how do you maximize their potential? And there's things that I learned in corporate America that I wish somebody had taught me at a much younger age. And so I think the skills that we use in that setting is applicable to every human being, regardless of the age. You just have to kind of modify, adapt, and obviously change the conversation to meet them where they're at. But I think there's such an opportunity to change the next generation of youth athletes, to use sports as a tool to grow these human beings and to equip them to serve in life and give back. And I think that's really our mission at Blueprint to Bluechip.
Yeah, well, it makes sense because you guys are living it every day. And, I talk often a lot about NIL, and people hear that. They think money, they think big dollars, they think, how can I get rich? And one of the biggest things I love to do is tell an athlete that there's so much more to building a brand than money. Yep. And it's so important they learn that lesson early on. And I do think we, to your point, Erin, are going to see a change in the shift of the mindset of some of these athletes when they realize, oh, wait a second, okay, I can't make millions. Like, there's only a very small percent that can. And if I actually build my platform around the things that I'm passionate about and things I want to do and be successful with, this could actually have long-term success. So, Tom, let's start with you and your background and why you're so passionate about it.
Great. Thanks, Greg. So I'm a former collegiate athlete. And then from there, I had a neck injury. I was sidelined indefinitely, so I was no longer allowed to play football. And then from there, it just spawned into endurance sports, from Ironmans to triathlons, Spartan races, cross-country bicycle races. And the whole thing was I was chasing the ghost, right? Because my dream as a child was to play in the NFL or play in the Olympics. I was sidelined, as I mentioned. So I was just chasing this ghost. And then, I had a goal of I wanted to do 55 races by the time I hit 55. And I hit it. It was awesome. But then I started, kind of thumbing around, and I've always mentored high school kids. And I thought, do I want to continue doing these races, or do I want to give back to the next generation? And because when I was playing, Greg, and I'm sure you've talked to other athletes, there was no NIL. There was no transfer portal unless you wanted to sit for a year. My brothers and I were all college athletes. We knew guys were getting paid, but that was under the table by the boosters and alumni. And there are actually athletes now that look us right in the eye and they just go, T, you told me I'm not going pro, so I got to get paid. I got to get a bag. So I'm like, okay, so you're not even, and you touched on it. Some of these athletes aren't even motivated by the sport anymore. They just want to get paid. And then consequently, what they start doing is they start chasing the offers, right? And they become 2-3 university transfers. And one of the things I try to remind these athletes, not all of your units are going to go with you. Not all your credits are going to go with you. So you're spreading yourself thin. So to answer your question, endurance sports was fantastic. I enjoyed the competitive nature of it, but I just felt like the next step for me was to give back to these kids.
Yep. And now you're the Chief Athletic Officer. Talk to me about what that means and what that includes.
Awesome. Yeah. So Blueprint, what originally started off as being a high school mentorship program as far as we're very white glove. We work with the coaches, we work with the parents, and we work with the student athlete. And as you know, Greg, sometimes parents can be the problem, right? And they live vicariously through their kids. So once we got all three of those aligned, it was green light the whole time. But then, as I mentioned, NIL and transfer portal, and then dealing with these pro athletes. So what started off as a mentorship program, and when I met Erin, she's like, Thomas, all your focus in it is bigger, faster, stronger. I'm like, well, yeah, that's what athletes need. And she goes, I think they need more than that. And I was like, I'm all ears. And so a year and a half later, here we are on your podcast, and Blueprint to Bluechip is the industry standard for character development as well as bigger, faster, stronger.
Yeah, I love it. And Erin obviously is a mom. I feel like you must have been in tune with that and in tune with this generation of parents, right? Because this different generation is certainly going to be unique, and I think that you're in a great place to speak to that. So talk to me about what you do kind of on a daily basis, and how you're helping foster this environment that is now so different than it once was.
Yeah, so what I want to foster and what I've seen with my own two kids, and it's always difficult being mom because do they want to listen to mom? But is how do we lay the foundation of who you really are? They have so much noise that they're competing with. Unlike, I think, when I grew up and went to high school, they have social media. I mean, they're just so connected and there's so much coming at them all the time. It's how do you kind of quiet that noise and really help these young individuals figure out who are you? What do you like? What are you interested in? How do you make that flourish versus I play football? It's like, well, that's great, but there is so much more to you than just a football player. And I've lived it with my own kids. They think their value lives and dies with how they do on that field. And, it's like, that's one element for you, and what are you learning from that? So I think using the tools I've been gifted to kind of reframe that with my own kids, but then bring that to the youth athletic space when we work with athletes, because I think athletes also have so many coaches. So you have the strength and conditioning coach, which is Thomas's expertise. Then you have mental mindset. Then you got they have all these people that are competing. And what we're trying to do is establish the foundation of who you are and kind of reinforce that you are whole and complete already. So life's going to throw you a bunch of things to test you, to help galvanize who you are meant to become. But we've got to establish the foundation so you're not like, a flag in the wind that's blowing whatever direction's coming at you or making poor choices when something comes up. And so I think as a parent, I noticed that with my own kids. And then kind of an interesting paradigm to bring to this is I think with how sports has evolved, and I think really the pay to play model that's now become established because you have to pay to play in high school. You're playing at the club level. I think these parents are now looking at the ROI, which is a very business metric. What's the return on my investment? I've spent $1,000 on a helmet for my son's football that's measured to his head to prevent CTE and concussions. $500 bats for my daughter to play softball. And so then you're putting all this pressure on them to go, okay, I've spent this money. Like, how are you performing? And so I think that's an element that we have to work through as parents of these are tools to support your kid, not I'm looking for a return on my investment, which is very challenging to kind of reframe that as a parent of, it's my kid doesn't need to give me back an NIL or a contract or something of that nature. Like, this is helping develop them as the young individuals that they're meant to become. And so I'm trying to take the pressure off and trying to help other parents do that, and then giving the foundation to the kids to be able to know who they truly are so that they can exceed in life. Because I've worked with the adults in the corporate space that are trying to figure that out. Why not try to figure that out when you're much younger and you're going to have things face you, but what's that foundation to come back to?
Yeah. And Tom, obviously, when we talk about youth sports today, Erin kind of mentioned it with having different coaches and people involved now in your circle. And I talk about this all the time, is you need to pick the right people in your circle, and you need to be able to trust, right? That word trust now has a lot more meaning, especially when we're talking about young athletes. And I remember, my days of playing baseball, the big thing was, don't throw too many curveballs. You're going to ruin your arm, right? Like, where are we physically with these youth athletes and some of the training that they should be thinking about, not be trying to push too quickly? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because Erin kind of talked about the youth sports and the parent side. Now I want to hear from your perspective, kind of the athlete side, what they physically should be doing, and are we pushing them too much in that direction?
The answer is yes, 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 and yes. One of the things, when you said youth sports, it's a very unique question, because sometimes first of all, I really don't like to work with younger kids and their parents, because what Erin was talking about, the parents put a lot of pressure on them. And I say, Mom, Dad, let them be a kid. Let them have fun. Usually, like Erin has cited these statistics, like how many percent, Erin? I think 70% quit by the time they're 13 years old. So the sweet spot for Blueprint is when we get a hold of these athletes in their sophomore year. I'm a big proponent of playing multiple sports, right? And by the time they get to their junior year, we train. How I train a baseball player is obviously different than a volleyball player or a football player and so forth. Erin and I had the good fortune of working with an athlete who was being recruited to go to the University of Oregon to play football. But he was a he was actually a 3-sport athlete, but he knew he was going to play football and baseball in college. So he actually forfeited his opportunity at Oregon because he had realistic expectations that he wasn't going to go pro, and he wanted to enjoy college and play 2 sports. You hit it on the head that there's so much pressure. Don't throw the ball. Do this, do this. And I got to remind my kids and my family, you got to have fun. You got to have fun. And he had an incredible network around him with his baseball coach, his football coach, and his parents and his trainers, and realistic expectations of where that kid was going to go. So for him, it was about an education. And then secondary was playing the sport that he loves. Now, Erin and I also we deal with some kids that this is their out, Greg, as you know. So majority of these inner city kids, this is their meal ticket. And we see this with the parents, and Erin has to deal with it, where a lot of these parents, and I'm not saying that I don't deal with it, but a lot of these parents look at their child as a meal ticket. This is an NIL deal. I want to make money off of my son. We had a call where an athlete, she wanted to go to UConn to play basketball, but her mom said, no, you're going to Duke. And that's the end of the story. And, that's a whole nother conversation. So each story and each client is very unique to us. So the sweet spot, to answer your question, is probably the sophomore, junior year, and then make sure they're surrounded with the appropriate people in their team.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Erin, kind of going back to youth sports, let's finish that topic, and then we're going to go on to kind of the college situation. Where do we see youth sports headed if we don't correct some of these issues that now exist?
Well, I think what we're gonna, I think we're gonna end up in a place that we don't like. I think we're gonna actually take away from sports what it actually, I think, is designed to give to our kids. And so I see it as where I think we're kind of eroding, I think, something that could teach and give them the skills of losses and tough lessons and learning. And if we don't correct this, I think we're eroding kind of the foundation of what I think our youth can be learning. And so how do we kind of restore the fun? How do we take the pressure off? How do we bring back that ability for the kid to just enjoy, have camaraderie, work through? Some of the best employees that corporations look for are athletes because they have such incredible skill sets to work within a team, and they enjoy teams for the most part. Some of us are singles, we like to do our own thing, swimming or, where it's very individualized, but most people like that team element. And so we have to restore, I think, that foundation of what we're meant to learn, and I think take some of the pressure off. So how do we take out, I think, some of the alleviate some of the pain point, I think, for the parents around pain, where they don't see it as pay to play, where it is more fun, it's more recreational. How do we fund these schools better so that, when I played in high school, my parents never paid a dime for me to go play any sport. It's like, sign up, go, oh, you're on basketball, volleyball, track, great, you're busy all year round. You're always practicing, doing something after school. And so I think helping the kids, I think we got to reestablish, how do we fund that better? And then I think also seeing that it's not your ticket. Athletics has a definite endpoint for everybody. And so also understanding this is a short, I think statistically they say, even if you make it, let's say, to the pros and stay for a while, 15% of your life is spent in athletics. And we have another 85% that is spent outside of that. And so I think really helping people gain perspective, I think, is a big part of it. And I think we've got to change that, and then have coaches that see their job is developing these youth athletes.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I know that Tom will be one of those is in the work that he does. And I think this is a great segue into the college phase, because now I want to talk about college and how this is viewed, because you've got this pressure on those youth athletes. And if that's going to be there, I think one way to take the pressure off of the youth athletes is actually to talk more about the college opportunity, and that you don't have to go D1, because as we know, 98% of athletes will not go pro. So that is a large number. And getting fixated on going D1, and granted, there are those athletes that is the right path for them. There's no doubt about that. But having someone fixated on it at the youth sports level, if we actually can highlight the benefits of a D2, a D3 program, an AIA program, junior college, etc., you actually could take some of the pressure off, help the youth sports, and highlight the benefits of D2, because D2, D3, they can play those multiple sports that they love, ideally, and they still love, hopefully. And I like the line here, restore the fun, Erin. I think that's great. Tom, how do we restore the fun in college sports and make them realize there's life after sports?
Manage expectations, right? Because, when that's the initial inception was when I was coming up, it was about D1. You were right, Greg. You got to get to a D1 school. And my coach had tremendous faith and confidence that I could have played at that level. But a lot of these kids, Erin and I have worked with them. Do you want to watch the game or do you want to play the game? We had a kid that was incredibly talented, went to Notre Dame, but he played special teams. But he was a fighting Irish, right? And he's going to have that pedigree for the rest of his life. So it's about managing expectations. And now the X factor here, Greg, that none of us had growing up was social media, right? I mean, we have athletes that we see at the D2 and D3 level that get looks at the G League, get looked at international basketball, and even the NBA, right? We have kids at the D2 level. We were working with a kid that I'm here in Colorado, went to Colorado School of Mines, got his degree in electrical engineering, and he was such a good football player. He played for 3 years in Canada, and it was never on his bucket list to play professional football. So he had an opportunity. It was a small school. He utilized social media to get an invite, and he took full advantage of it because it was something he wanted to do. So the bottom line is you have to manage expectations. And if your goal is to go to the NFL, to the NBA, fill in the blanks, then we have to just work nonstop at achieving that goal. But as you touched on, 98% of the kids. So it's about, let's find a school that matches your skill set, that you can get a great education and play the sport you love, and you not get burned out, not get injured, and you just walk away disliking the university as well as the sport.
Yeah. All right. So, Erin, let's dive in on this and talk about exactly what you guys are doing in ways to help athletes at Blueprint to Bluechip, and some of this framework where you've talked about, character over cloud, accountability over excuses, discipline over motivation, integrity over image. What are some of the things and what are some of the ways that you're doing this with athletes?
So we do it in a variety of ways. A large part of it really is helping them first identify who they are. Who are you at the core? Let's really work through that. And most of us have never had somebody outside of us spend a lot of time with us really diving in to the core of who we are. But then we want to think about, okay, now if we know who we are, how do we make decisions? Do we slow down and think about okay, if I'm faced with this choice, do I go to class? Do I skip class? Do I do what are the choices that we're making? And do we understand the in-moment ramifications and the long-term ramifications of those decisions? In the moment, it might be, this is no big deal. Most athletes and most kids are thinking, this has got no impact right now. This feels good today. I don't feel like this, or whatever the case might be. But the reality is, it's okay, if you don't go to class often enough, you might fail the class. If you don't do this, you might not end up on the football team or the basketball team or whatever. So understanding, every decision you're making at any given moment, that's what we're kind of training them and giving them reps in, has ramifications of where you ultimately want to be. And is everything that you want to be and do, is every choice you're making aligning to that? And understanding to be exceptional, hence the word blue chip. I think we all have the opportunity to be blue chip, is that in order to be exceptional, you have to make exceptional momentary decisions over and over and over again in order to get there. So the devil is kind of in the details, and that's ultimately what we're training and teaching these kids to, as well as their parents. You got to zoom out and look at your actions. We sometimes act and are not conscious of it. And so we're trying to bring that consciousness to the decision making and giving them the reps in that realm so that they can show up in any moment and go, okay, I know exactly what I'm going to do right now.
Well, and Tom, you're the rep guy with the strength training and everything. I mean, it's similar in, weightlifting or physical training. You are doing the same thing over and over again. You're getting better at it because you're training and you're doing the things that you should be doing. And It sounds like there can be a nice little crossover here, which is why I think you and Erin work so well together.
100%. Our core values and our mission statement basically is character, integrity, and discipline with every step. Whether you step into the weight room, whether you step into the classroom, whether you step into the film room, fill in the blanks. And what's really incredible, Greg, is when we have an initial discovery call, we'll ask somebody the simple question, what does character, integrity, and discipline mean to you? And I'm astonished that there are some athletes that just can't define that, and their parents. And we go, okay, look, you're a basketball player. How do you get better at free throws? You got to get the reps. So that's what Erin and I incorporate, is incorporating character, integrity, and discipline curriculum. And, one of the things I've said to some of my athletes, I said, this has come down from the NCAA to us. That's why we built the trust with the NCAA. Somebody at the NCAA level said, what's the difference between a 4.7 and a 4.4? Character. And I was like, wow, that's a good point. He's like, and this is coming from a coach. He said, if you could run a 4.4, you could bench 300 pounds, squat 600 pounds. But if you're a I don't want you. And I was like, so it really comes down, are you coachable? And these are the anecdotes that we share. It's like, it's not just about bigger, faster, stronger anymore. It's about who are you as a character? Who are you as a teammate? Who are you are you a coachable athlete? So yeah, Erin and I are real sticklers about giving them that curriculum as well. And, I will tell you this, that what blindsided me, Greg, and Erin had the foresight, and it's come back to our benefit a couple of times. Erin said, we got to put together a crisis curriculum. And I was like, well, why? And she's like, well, because athletes make impulsive and careless decisions all the time. She's like, didn't you? And I go, I did. And I didn't have social media to capture it. Right. So this is one of the things that Erin did so well in the foresight of our crisis curriculum.
No, that's really cool, and I think it's a great idea because it's only a matter of time, that an athlete, not to say every athlete, but an athlete is going to make a mistake and have that happen to them. Let's talk about, Erin, how people can get involved and sign up, or what the costs are with working with you guys.
So go visit blueprintbluechip.com. That's probably the best place to start. You can obviously find us on Instagram, social media. Reach out to me, Erin at erinsarles.com. And we do everything is custom tailored to each athlete and to their family. So that's how we work on an athlete level. So there's not a one size fits all. It's really dependent upon, what they need in order to succeed and excel. And so we're kind of a prescription-based, a white glove approach with what we do. And then we also do team training. So for coaches, ADs out there, we work with entire athletic departments, entire teams to work on their culture, to work on the character, integrity, and discipline of all their athletes. We work with the coaches. How do you establish that? And then at the high school level, we like to involve the parents in some workshops of like, how can you show up to be the best supportive parent? So we're not screaming from the stands, yelling at the refs, and making our school look bad when we're getting out of control. And I can say that because I'm a parent, and I see it at every game and everything I go to with my kids. So, that's really kind of the two ways you can work with us. And that's the best place to find us, is just go online. You can book a call and we'll get on. And like we said, we're very detailed, and we like to make this very personal for each family and individual that we're working with.
Yeah. And does the work also integrate with the gym aspect, Tom, and the workouts and the routines and all that kind of stuff as well? Explain how that kind of works together.
100%. Yeah. So to build on what Erin said, it's not a cookie cutter, right? What we do is, if we have an athlete who is a wide receiver, that's a skilled player versus somebody who is an offensive lineman, right? There's not one fitness program that fits each one. We have some linemen that want to put on weight, they want to put on strength, and we have receivers and DBs that want to get a little bit faster. So we have a whole curriculum that is designed specifically for that position, and it's not just sports specific.
And do you do a wide range of sports, obviously, as well? What do you do? What don't you do? Give me a little lay of the land.
Everything. I mean, the obvious basics are football, basketball, baseball. We have golfers, we have swimmers that we work with, we have lacrosse players, we have volleyball, and something that I'm super excited about is women's flag football.
Yeah.
I am beside myself. I think it's fantastic that women are having an opportunity to play football. And I will tell you this, Mom and Dad, I have never heard, being a football player, I've never heard so much trash talking coming from the women's flag football. It actually makes me blush, to be honest with you.
Well, I think honestly we saw a little bit of that with the PWHL as well. I mean, people weren't expecting, a little bit of fisticuffs, and all of a sudden they see how passionate they are, and all of a sudden things can happen. So
that's right.
But yeah, absolutely. So, well, I think this is terrific. I'm right there with you on the women's sports side of things, and I think it's terrific what you guys are doing. I think it's extremely encouraging because, as we said at the top here, youth sports is in a position of need right now, and I feel like we're some of the individuals that are out there trying to push the needle. And as Erin said, and I think we need T-shirts for this, but restore the fun. I'd like to be able to do that. So, especially as a former athlete myself, I remember those days. I remember the fun I had, and I'd love to be able to see that come back at a youth level. And I think we'll eventually get there. I don't know what consequences we're going to have to take first, but hopefully we can keep everybody on the right track. And you two are certainly guiding light. So
awesome, Greg. Appreciate it. Thanks for your time. Thanks for having us on.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
Oh, you're very welcome, guys. All right, that wraps up another edition of the Athlete Brand Advisor podcast. As we said, you can visit bluechip.com for all the details. They're also on Instagram, and we will see you next time. I'm Greg Glynn. We're glad you could tune in, and have a great day, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Athlete Brand Advisor podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes from today's episode and catch up on recent episodes at pliablemarketing.com. Be sure to follow at pliablemktg on social media to follow athletes who have NIL representation and work with Pliable. Have an idea for our podcast? We encourage you to share topics and guest ideas by emailing our production staff at info@pliablemarketing.com. We love hearing from our loyal listeners, so jump in and be part of the podcast because, well, that's how we roll.